Any recommendations for the kids?
Sure. What sort of things do you like?
Superheroes.
Superheroes? Well, this guy's pretty awesome. Or if you like that, why work when you can Bitcoin? Get money, get girls. Speaking of girls, I haven't forgotten about you. Could try Inspiration.
Have you not just got, like, a comedy or something?
Yeah, sure, of course we do. Let's all laugh for Fat Becky. Someone in your school was actually in that. Do you like cam girls?
What's that?
Trust me, you will. What else? What else? Oh, yeah. Let's be friends.
Oh, that sounds a bit more...
That should give you about 16 hours worth of viewing, so you should be all right for the weekend.
Quite the start, isn't it? Kia ora koutou, no mai, haere mai. My name is Matilda Green and I am thrilled to welcome you to Childhood Rewired tonight. Thank you for being here. This event has been brought to you by B416 with the generous support of Kiwibank, and we would like to sincerely thank Kiwibank for helping make tonight possible and for their commitment to supporting the well-being of New Zealand families and young people. So for those who aren't familiar with B416, we're a group of parents, young people, researchers, educators, tech experts, and business and community leaders who are passionate about creating a safer, healthier digital world for our tamariki, somewhat different to the video you just have seen. So while many people know B416 through our advocacy work around social media and age-appropriate protections for young people online, our work is broader than that. At its heart, B416 is about helping young people thrive in a rapidly changing digital world and supporting the adults who are raising and caring for those kids. And through our work, we speak to parents every week about lots of different challenges. But one thing we hear again and again is we know there are challenges, but what do we actually do at home? How do we navigate smartphones, social media, gaming, online safety, anxiety, body image, AI, and all the other things that our kids are growing up with? Because the reality is that childhood has changed incredibly quickly. And many of us are trying to parent through challenges that simply didn't exist when we were younger, and there is not a handbook for that. So tonight is our attempt to try and create one. Before we kick off our first speaker, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown on how the event's going to go. So first up, we will have Dr. Samantha Marsh. Dr. Marsh is a Senior Research Fellow in the Department of General Practice and Primary Healthcare, School of Population Health, Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences at University of Auckland. Did I get that right, Sam? Yes, okay, I got a nod. Yes, oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh gosh, I've lost my place now. Her PhD investigated the relationship between screen use and childhood obesity in New Zealand. And Sam is one of New Zealand's leading researchers on the impact of screens on children and families. And I've heard Sam speak many times, and every time I learn something new. So we're in for a treat tonight. She's also happy to have a little chat to anyone at the end if you've got any questions that you'd like to talk to her about. After Sam, we will welcome Robert Knight. Robert is a highly experienced physiotherapist who has worked with elite athletes and teams across New Zealand and internationally. He's currently the lead physiotherapist for the New Zealand Breakers and the Tall Blacks, and previously founded Kinetics, one of Auckland's largest physiotherapy practices. Alongside his clinical work, Robert has a strong background in innovation and entrepreneurship, bringing a really unique perspective on health, performance, and well-being. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Robert tonight. We'll then take a quick break for a few minutes, and when we come back, we will hear from our incredible youth advisory group. They're a really important part of B416, and they'll be sharing their personal experiences online and what they hope for the future when it comes to young people navigating the digital world. Then finally, we will finish off the night with practical insights from our expert panel. So I'll introduce the panel a little bit later on, but for now, I would love to welcome to the stage our first speaker, Dr. Samantha Marsh.
Okay, so I want to start tonight with just a little snapshot of what's happening in New Zealand. So we know that 90% of our teens are on social media, so use is almost universal. We know that the average amount of time that a teen spends on social media is 2.5 hours a day, but actually almost a third of our kids are spending 5+ hours a day on there, so most of their spare time. But at the same time, we know that 39%, so almost 4 out of 10, wish that social media had never been invented. So this is telling an interesting story, not of one of kids who are really happy to be on these platforms, but kids who are kind of chained to them. They have to be on them. And then finally, we also know that about 50% of New Zealand teens say that they wish they hadn't been given social media so young. So when your kid is begging you for social media, keep this in mind because they may not actually thank you for it later. And this is kind of one of my biggest concerns, is that this generation of kids, when they reach their mid-20s or so, they might really ask us why we gave them access to social media when by this time we knew about all the harms. So this is very important because social media has been linked with a whole host of negative outcomes very consistently in research, and it's becoming more and more so. So things like depression and anxiety, eating disorders, issues with body image, cognitive issues, so problems with attention, poor sleep, and also physical health outcomes like headaches and things like that. So you'll hear more about that tonight from experts in those areas. But now I just want to touch on this very specific type of social media use, and that's problematic use. This is really important because this use mirrors addiction, and it's been very strongly linked with things like anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation. And our research in New Zealand shows that 22% of our teenagers meet the criteria for problematic use. And when we reanalyzed the data and just looked at females, that increased to 25%. So a quarter of our teen girls. So how does social media cause, or how is it linked to all these outcomes? I'm not going to go through them all, and this is probably not an exhaustive list, but it's just to highlight that it's not just about predators and content and algorithms. And actually, some of these things are negative outcomes, but at the same time, they drive engagement. So just taking loneliness, we know that kids who spend a lot of time on social media have increased loneliness, but also lonely kids turn to social media and engage with it more and more. Now, we're talking about social media tonight, but just to keep in mind that a lot of these things also apply to other platforms like Roblox and YouTube Kids. And then we need to add in this extra layer of complexity, and that is the teen brain. So those mechanisms that I just talked about before, they're kind of important for all of us, but we do know that teens are more vulnerable to them. And so I'm just going to go through a couple of things as to why that is. So the first is this mismatch in the brain. So during the teen years, there is an explosion of development in the limbic system, or the emotional part of the brain. And an easy way to think of that is kind of like the accelerator in the car. And then the prefrontal cortex, which deals with things like problem solving and decision making, that's just kind of developing on a relatively linear trajectory. And that is kind of, if you think of it as the brakes in the car. So there's this mismatch where their teen brain is a lot of accelerator and not a lot of brakes. Now the thing is that when a kid is on social media, we also know that it really lights up the limbic system. And what we really want happening in the teen years is our kids engaging in activities that really activate the prefrontal cortex. Now, we also know that teens have a heightened sensitivity to social rewards, and they're also at the peak risk-taking period of their lives. Now, this makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, because this is the time when our kids are meant to be going a little bit, moving away from home a little bit and meeting new people. And that involves taking some risks, but also being able to read social cues. only social media kind of exploits this with social rewards, so things like likes and shares and comments. And then the final thing is that we also know that the reward system in their brain is in overdrive. So that part of the brain has more dopamine receptors than the adult brain. So Anna Lembke, she is a researcher in America. She is an expert in addictions, and she talks about this, about how social media and other screens are highly rewarding but low effort activities. So in normal life, dopamine's there to make us do some hard work. We get a little hit of dopamine, we find it rewarding, and we're motivated to do that activity again. So that's things like studying for a test, or making new friends, or doing physical activity. Only when we're on social media, we get that reward with very little effort. In fact, you can just get it from receiving a notification. And what the brain then does, or what people think is happening, is then the brain kind of tries to reach a new homeostasis. And in order to do that, dopamine levels dip below baseline briefly. And so we feel like that is a craving and a low mood. So ideally, what we want happening in the adolescent years is our kids not getting this highly rewarding, low effort activity, engaging in that. We want them engaging in activities that make them work for their dopamine up front. So what do we do? I want to talk about the current solutions and why they're not enough. So first of all, filters and safe phones. Filters are very important, and I recommend that everybody has filters on their devices. I'm not saying that, but to keep in mind that it's mainly about content and they're not 100% effective, but also a lot of things that are harmful to our kids are never going to be picked up by a filter. So for example, I don't want my 12-year-old daughter watching videos of 13-year-old girls who are spending an hour or 2 hours in the morning doing their beauty routines. That's not harmful content, but it will probably be harmful. Also, safe phones, anything that connects to the internet, kids can find workarounds, and that is just a Google search away. So I think better name for that might be safer phones. Digital literacy, a lot of people are like, well, we just need to teach our kids to use this stuff better and teach them. The problem with that is that digital literacy is a prefrontal cortex skill. So our kids can learn this stuff. You can give them a test and they'll perform well in it. But then when they're on social media, that part of their brain kind of shuts down, and it's the limbic system that's working. And so all that learning kind of goes out the window. And that's why we have research that shows that digital literacy programs increase skills, but that doesn't result in improvements in wellbeing outcomes. Another one is to teach our kids to be good digital citizens. I would argue that we need to teach our kids to be good citizens, good people, and then that will translate into the online world when they're ready. Parental monitoring, again, is super important, but there is lots of disappearing content. You can't keep up on this stuff, and also you can't be sitting over your kid's shoulder all day while they're on social media. Other people will also say that we need to put kids on these platforms in order to build their resilience. Now, some of the stuff that our kids are seeing is so horrific that if they're not negatively impacted by that, I wouldn't call that resilience, I would call that desensitization, and that is not ideal development. And then finally, contracts. I have a couple of issues with contracts. First of all, they don't work. So our parents didn't get us to sign a contract to say we weren't going to smoke or drink alcohol when we were young, because they knew that that wouldn't work. Also, our kids will sign anything in order to get social media. So there is a level of coercion in there. And I just don't think we should be making the parent-child relationship transactional. Also, as I said, we need to be addressing all these things, and those things don't address all these things. So any solution should do its best to kind of target as many of these things as possible. So I've worked in this space for many years, and for quite a few years, I suggested that the solution was digital balance. Only digital balance didn't work, because I can't teach your children to stay safe in an unsafe environment. And that is because there's nothing I can tell you to tell your kids that's going to stop them from finding this really rewarding, from activating the limbic system. What I think the real answer is delaying until their brains are ready for it. until they've reached, until they're mature enough to handle these platforms. Now, the problem with this is that a lot of the activities that we know that build the prefrontal cortex, they are being displaced by social media. And so that is one of the reasons why I say delay for as long as possible. Now, I don't think this is all about taking things away from our kids. In fact, my solution is more about what we give back to our kids. And we need to give back to our kids all the activities and the things that social media has eroded away from their lives. And those are the things that build the prefrontal cortex. So things like real-world relationships. So our kids need to hang out in person with their friends, but we also need to remember that research shows they actually only need about 2 to 5 friends. They don't need 500 online friends, and in fact, that is overwhelming to their brains. But when I'm talking about real-world relationships, I also mean their relationship with us, because a lot of parents feel like they need to step out of their kids' lives in the teenage years, but that's really often when we need to step in. And unfortunately, social media is a barrier between the parent-child relationship. We also want our children to be capable adults. So we want them to have life skills, to know how to make their bed every morning and put their clothes out at night, and to be able to make food and things like that. I also recommend that you create spaces for what I call emotional playgrounds. That's from Gordon Neufield's work, but it's basically places where our kids can go to process their emotions, and that can be journaling, listening to music, playing sport, just anywhere where they can have time to have their own thoughts without other people's thoughts kind of bombarding them. Time outdoors is hugely healing. Also, their identity formation is also really important. And so when they're on social media, they're just always receiving content from other people. But what we need for true identity formation is to go out into the world and then to come back and have time to talk with our friends and our families and just to process it. And then all the other activities we know that are really good for brain development. So sleep, as I said before, listening to music, but also just a lot of downtime, because our kids don't have downtime anymore, and it is so important for their development. And I would say just prioritising any activity where they have to work for their dopamine up front. So tonight we are talking about what parents can do, but of course, as Cecilia said, this isn't really a parenting problem, and we need change at all levels. So Australia brought in age restrictions recently, and there's a lot of stuff in the media that this isn't working. These companies aren't playing ball at the moment. They're behaving very badly. But I do want to say that the latest statistics that I've seen is about 30 to 40% of kids who are underage have been kicked off these platforms. In public health, that is a massive success. You know, people talk about it just being a blunt tool, but it is a very successful blunt tool if we can implement something this, pretty much overnight, and it has this sort of impact. And I just want to finish by saying that just because social media use in young people is a social norm currently, it doesn't make it healthy, and it also doesn't mean that it can't change. Thank you.
That's a great ending from the last talk of smoking, and I was starting with smoking. So I felt really privileged when I was asked to present on the physical effects of device use in adolescence alongside Sam's mental effects. But I have to admit, I was at first a little hesitant to put this up because it sounds so melodramatic. But what I mean by this is that back in the 1950s, when everyone was puffing away quite happily on their cigarettes, and doctors were maybe seeing a few troublesome coughs in their offices, we didn't see the true impact of that until 20 years later in the form of lung cancer. And what I'm seeing right now at the coalface of physiotherapy in kids, adolescents, in their spines is actually quite terrifying. So forgive me if I get a little bit evangelical. So I spent my life in performance sport. I've got a background in adolescent health and postgraduate qualifications, but probably my greatest experience or claim to expertise is raising my own 23-year-old twin boys through their own digital adolescence. And I'd really like today, hopefully, highlight some of the issues we're seeing and give some tools to change it. So thoracic hyperkyphosis, that's kind of a fancy medical word we use to describe the rounded back that we generally see in the elderly. except unfortunately it's no longer in the elderly. So this is a 14-year-old boy who came to my clinic with back pain, and I just asked him to sit naturally, and that's exactly how he is. And this is kind of normal these days, and we're seeing it more and more. The trouble is, what happens when you sit like that for a long time, the stress on the back of your spine there, on the ligaments, makes them eventually become useless. It's like elastic that's been stretched too long and they stop working. Then you get compression on the front of the bones there. That leads to chronic inflammation that eventually calcifies, and eventually this becomes your fixed position that you can't get out of. And at that point, it's irreversible. And people say to me, I know I've got a stoop back, I know I've got a bit of a rounded back, okay? But it's more than that. So if you look at the picture on the left there, straight spine, or relatively straight, we have subtle curves, they're biomechanically designed like that. As soon as you exaggerate the curve in the upper back, you get compensations. The biggest one is the head moves forward. What that then leads to is, first of all, it's the fastest way to arthritis in your neck. So you get a compression between the 5th and 6th joints, and if you saw the number of 20 and 30-year-olds now I see in the clinic with early arthritis in the neck, it's actually scary. And kids are now starting like this at 12 and 13. God help them in the next 10 years. It's the best way to get headaches. The muscles that run from the base of your skull right through to the back of your shoulders, when your head's forward, it's like pulling reins all day, and you start getting headaches. Causes jaw problems. So when your head sits in this position, your jaw is this great little joint. Biomechanically, it's then altered and you start getting jaw problems, and we're seeing this around the world right now. It also leads to snoring. So poor posture, you go to bed at night like this, your jaw falls open and you snore. So any men get their posture changed. Lower back pain. So that upper back leads to lower back pain. So the mirror image of the neck and the lower back, again, the 5th joint in both of those, it causes compression and it leads to wear and tear. Shoulder problems. When you've got a stoop back, it's impossible to lift your arm up. And this is really important in my job in performance sports. So anybody in basketball, overhead sports like swimming, it creates all sorts of issues. And the last one is breathing. So we know asthmatics who have poor posture have poorer breathing outcomes. And don't underestimate this, because the way you hold yourself dictates how you feel and also dictates how people perceive you. And there's any number of studies showing this. And once it becomes fixed, your perception, people's perception of you also becomes fixed. So I actually have a head in a bag, but I'm probably the only person who carries a head in a bag. Your head, but I've only got one hand. So your head weighs 5 or 6 kilograms. When it sits on top of your head in good alignment, like the ladies in Africa with the baskets on their neck, it actually has very little impact. But for every 2.5 centimeters forward, the head weight doubles because of the lever. So if you're only 7 centimeters forward, you're weighing almost a bag of cement on the joints, and they cannot sustain that. And look at this kid here, and at first glance you think, oh, that's not too bad, until you drop a plumb bob down. And you see his ear is already probably a couple of centimeters forward, so his head weight is probably 10 or 12 kilograms already, and that just gets worse with age. Unfortunately, that's the new norm. And this is what we're seeing all the time. You stand at a bus stop, that's what you see. And so this is becoming normal. And when you look at this is a statistic where neck pain in adolescents in a lot of developed countries has overtaken asthma now and years live with disability. I remember when I first started work, if any teenager came in with neck pain, my first thought was, oh my God, meningitis. These days I just ask how many hours they spend on their computers. Just going to quickly anatomy lesson. Now, basically your skeleton, your spine is a bag of bones with no support whatsoever. But, and this is my favourite slide where I've got to not get distracted here. Basically, you have 2 sets of muscles in your body. You've got ones that hold you up and protect you, and you've got ones that move you, and they're not interchangeable. So the ones on the left there, they're the muscles that support you. It's kind of like, I call that the core muscle. It runs from the base of your skull all the way to your feet. These are the ones, like I said, they're like low-watt bulbs. They work all the time. It's what's holding your neck up now, and you're not even thinking about them. They're kind of cool as well because they're actually very small, and they're attached right to the skeleton. And so they act like a school of fish. If one moves, the others all react very quickly. So that's what gives you good balance. But outside that, back to the other slide again, you have what we call the phasic muscle. That's the beach muscle. They're the show ponies of the world. So they look nice, but they can cause problems. So the 2 muscle systems act together. The tonic muscle that support you, I think of as the little rotor on the helicopter. The big muscles are the big rotor. That's power. And you've all seen the movie where, the tail gets shot off the helicopter and it spins out of control and it crashes, and that's what happens when you get this sort of setup. So I'm just going to take you back to babies. So this is the most important stage of human development. So what happens here is babies crawling learn to differentiate between those two muscle systems. So they learn to stabilize and they learn to move their arms and legs. And that's where it's the key moment in a child's life. So don't encourage your kids to walk early, don't encourage them to stand early, and definitely don't use jolly jumpers. And again, this is my second favourite slide, because I look at this kid. He's probably 2 years old. So by age 2, your head weighs about 80% of an adult. By age 5, it's 90%. So it doesn't grow much after that. Yet he's able to hold this up quite easily because the alignment of his spine and his intrinsic muscle is going at that time. And then he loses it. Like the old days. And then we look at this, and this is where it all starts to fall apart. So I don't even need to talk about the slide. You've all seen this, and it's obvious, but the stress on these kids' backs, and I look at the girl on the right who's probably age 14, and she's already got the posture and the spinal habits of an old person. At her age, that just gets worse and worse. And like I said, if you look at the statistics of what's happening with spinal fusions in the neck, it's happening in the 30 and 40-year age bracket, because by then the damage is done. So this is it. Back there's the 14-year-old on the left, and then on the right is the 23-year-old, my son's flatmate, unfortunately. So what we do when we're growing, it stays with us and it becomes irreversible, and it affects us later in life. Now, later in life used to be at 70, but unfortunately it's now affecting us earlier and earlier. And like we spoke about before, Sam spoke about with the teenage brain being susceptible to alcohol and social media, this is the age where our bodies are most susceptible to sustained postures as well, and most affected by our habits. And this is the million-dollar question, okay? I don't have a silver bullet. I wish I did. But social media, phones, devices, computers are here to stay, and they're useful tools. But in the same way a carrot is until you poke yourself in the eye. So I look at things like the chair. When people have sore backs, their natural thing is to go and buy a better chair, an ergonomic chair, a more supportive chair. But unfortunately, what that does is the exact opposite of what we want. It basically detrains the muscles that support you and protect you and causes more problems. And I look on the right at old Taylor Swift there. This is a form postural bra that Taylor Swift was snapped wearing during rehearsal on the Eras tour. Apart from the fact that sales went up 400% that day, and again, I'd be the first, if Taylor's influence was going to change posture in kids, I'd be the first to support her. But braces don't work in the same way chairs don't work. So what happens is all they do is they pull you into a frame, but they don't create the muscle that holds you there. They're a tool, but they're not the be-all and end-all. So when I talk about solutions that actually make a real difference, I've divided into two categories. Young kids, that's where we have our most influence, is that early age. And basically, good digital health should be ingrained in a young child the way brushing their teeth is. So boundaries on the phones, etc. The second thing is active play. This is where children develop the intrinsic muscle that supports their skeletons for the rest of their life. Get them outside, keep them playing, climb trees. I know that sounds like the old days, but it's exactly what we need to actually build up the strength. We see this in performance sport as well. We call them active couch potatoes. So what we've got in high-level sports now is an athlete who's paid a lot of money to sit at home and play PlayStation for most of the day and come for 2 hours intense training, and that's all he does. He's lost that sort of old school farmer strength that you used to get from, like I said, I do sound like my grandfather now, like chucking hay bales, digging holes like they used to in the old days. And our injuries have changed completely from when I first started work, and we have to deal with them in a different way. Then there's teenagers. Then good luck. So the first thing I'm going to say is education. Now, this is stuff that should be taught in schools, and I can't believe it, or maybe it is, but I've never heard of it. But when I get teenagers in the clinic and I teach them this sort of thing, I can tell you the engagement is incredible. As soon as they got understanding, they really get on board. And I can tell you I've seen some life-changing examples in this. When the teenagers understand, they do buy in. They just need the knowledge. The second thing is show them. The most powerful tool I've ever used in the clinic is a side-on photo. iPhones were great. And you show people what they look like sideways, and it's frightening. And again, I've got a rogues gallery which I could show people, but take a photo of yourself, take a photo of your teenager, and have a look at it. It is so visually graphic. Environment, like I just bagged the chair, but what I'm going to say at home, if there's one thing you can do, is don't use phones, etc., on soft surfaces like your bed and your sofa. It just turns children's spines into question marks rather than exclamation marks. And last thing, harden teenagers, but encourage them to keep active. Gym programs build the outside muscle. They do not build the inside muscle. And what we're ending up with is a generation of gala apples who are kind of all polished and shiny on the outside, but soft on the inside. And this is actually leading to a whole issue in sports where we're seeing ACL ruptures in knees and shoulder dislocations in teenagers going through the absolute roof. And that's because, like I said, they're focusing on strength, not on stability. Old school stuff like hacky sack creates that internal muscle. And last thing, and maybe most importantly, is don't be this parent. I stand in the supermarket watching parents bent over their phone with the kids sitting there and then telling the kid to stay off the phone. It doesn't work. So I'm going to paraphrase this and say, you know, what we should have been doing 10, 15 years ago with our kids when the digital revolution was happening was looking after them. We didn't really know the damage. And like I said, the stuff I'm seeing at the coalface now, I never saw this 15, 20 years ago. It just did not exist. And so I'm having to change the way I treat. But we have to act now. It's not a conversation anymore. It really is a call to action because this generation in their next sort of 10 or 15 years is in really big trouble. So hopefully you can join me in the revolution. Thanks very much.
Freedom is a choice, and yet so many people decide not to be free.
I was on YouTube one day, and I came across this video by a guy called Jack Piggott. And he basically just said, you need to quit social media. And I was like, what? Why would I do that? And I slowly started getting what he was saying. Like, my sleep was terrible at the time, and I was like constantly being bored, not being able to just sit in a room and not doing anything. I used to be quite the video gamer. RuneScape, I have about 3,100 hours on it. I had some really stuffed dopamine. My base level was watching 5 phones and playing 10 games all at once sort of thing. I did a test. I could only sit 22 seconds staring at a wall before I was grabbing my phone straight away. It was crazy. I just decided, I hate this. Like, I saw no gain in it. Now I can sit for like the entire day not even worrying about it. It bores me. I'd rather be outside and having fun.
So that video there was from a series called Kids Unplugged, and the producers Kylie and Anton are actually here tonight. So it's well worth a watch. Well worth a watch. So when it comes to discussing children and young people online, their lived experience is incredibly important. And I know that there are some teenagers and young kids in the audience today, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of adults talking about this in your life. So the youth voice is very beneficial. So our next panel brings together some incredibly driven, inspiring young people who have thought really deeply about these issues, and they're advocating for positive change. Whether you agree with every idea or not, their voices matter because they're the ones growing up in a world shaped by digital technology. So please give another warm welcome to our Youth Advisory Group. Okay, I will introduce everybody one by one. Down here, you can wave Caden. We've got Caden Scott. Caden is a former game developer and current executive director of the International Online Crime Coordination Centre, focused on counteracting digital child exploitation across social media and online gaming platforms. Welcome, Caden. Next to Caden, we have Arden Morunga. Arden is an 18-year-old University of Auckland student, coach, tutor and youth advocate. Originally from Hamilton, Arden became the youth MP for Hamilton East. Alongside his studies, he coaches rowing and rugby, tutors te reo Māori, and is passionate about helping young people realise their potential and have their voices heard. Welcome, Arden. Next up, we have Mackenzie Roskruge. Mackenzie is a business development executive at Zeal, one of the fastest growing talent acquisition tech companies in New Zealand, and is in her last year of her law and commerce degree at University of Auckland. And last but certainly not least, we have Lucy Kilgour. Lucy is a second-year law, commerce and language student. She's passionate about youth advocacy and civics, having spoken at Parliament and recently written for the University of Auckland Ingenio magazine. Welcome, Lucy. All right, so let's kick off with you, Lucy. Why do you think kids actually want social media in the first place? What's the big draw card?
Oh my goodness, for me it was definitely just that all my friends had it, but I didn't actually think about what was on it, and I didn't know what I was missing out on until I watched one of my friends scroll through Instagram on her iPad at school. And I thought, whoa, so much is happening that I don't know about, and I feel like I'm missing out, or I need to see this. So it was that curiosity piece and wanting to know what was happening, but not a particular cool thing about social media itself.
And what do you think it does to friendship dynamics? You know, having so much awareness of where everyone is and what they're doing and who they're spending time with. How does that impact a friendship group?
Yeah, it's really different to when you could just knock on your friend's door and hang out, and that was that. Instead, we could see if two people in a group were hanging out without everyone else, because we would follow each other on Snap Maps, or people would post an Instagram story. And then it was the questions of, why wasn't I invited, that started going. Or you'd have group chats with special names, and you felt special if you were added to the group chat. Or there would be the big group, and then there would be the little group that you wanted to be part of. And that made it feel more competitive, or like we were tracking to move up a hierarchy, rather than actually just being friends.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think as children and young people or teenagers, going against the grain or doing something different to your friends, i.e. not getting a phone or not getting social media, can be really, really hard. There's that intense feeling of FOMO, which is a really big deal when you're a teenager especially. So how do teenagers combat that sense of FOMO, that they're missing out if they're not on there? What advice would you give, Mackenzie?
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I found social media quite anxiety-inducing, to be honest. You're spending a lot of time scrolling through so many different things that it becomes quite hard to categorise what the important things are that you actually should be paying attention to as well. So I feel like realising that not everything you're viewing all the time, not all of these other lives that you're looking at that are maybe a little bit different to yours, are super important to who you are as a person. So I think one thing that was really great for me to kind of get over the sense of FOMO with social media comes down to what my parents did for me, and that was to get me involved in things like individual sports, team sports, being able to do more things with my friends so I could actually unplug and bring more perspective back to who I was as a person, to build my own identity back.
It's really good to know, because I'm sure all the parents in the audience are like, how do we get what you guys have got and that you don't want to be on social media? So that's very handy. And what about the things that you're not doing if you're on social media? I mean, looking back now, what do you wish you had spent more time doing? I mean, Arden, I've heard you talk about everything you did instead of social media. Can you elaborate a bit about that?
Yeah, firstly, I'm just trying to make sure I'm sitting up nice and tall.
We all are, Arden, we all are.
Self-conscious up here for that. No, but for me, I think one of the biggest and most important factors of how I've developed as a person and my character and my beliefs and in my values has been the community that I've had around me. And I draw a lot of those sort of learnings from what I've been involved in. Now, I've done rugby, I've done rowing, I've done debate, I've done kapahaka, I've done tutoring, and not only is it the people that you meet there and the real in-person connections that you make that help to shape who you are and also carry along lifelong friendships, it teaches you a lot as well. It does teach you a lot. One point I think I want to make is that not everybody's the same, and you don't all have to have the same interests. You don't have to do a sport, you don't have to do an art, but just do something that's not staring at a screen all day. You know, we heard about FOMO, fear of missing out. We're missing out the most when we're looking at a screen and watching that short form content, it's not good for us. And we've heard about the negative effects. We've heard about the negative things online. And so I just encourage young people and parents, get your kids out, get them to do something that's bigger than themselves and learn how to work with others, and also spend time with the people that you love. We're all getting older.
Some of us more than others, Arden.
We're all getting more experienced in life. I walked into, because I coach rowing, I walked into the school today to go hand in a vetting form, and I was not in uniform anymore, and that made me feel more experienced in life. But when you build genuine connections with people, that's how you win. And it's just going to be like the Chiefs on Saturday when they win against the Hurricanes. Cheers.
Oh, thanks, Arden. Yep, you are 18. It's all downhill from there. What can I say? So, I'm joking. Now, I know a lot of parents have concerns around the rise of gaming as well and the risks that are associated with that. You know, things like strangers having direct access to your children and some really extreme content on some of these gaming platforms. Caden, this is your wheelhouse as a former gamer, game developer and gamer potentially. What red flags should parents know about when it comes to gaming? Like, what are the features that are really problematic?
I think a lot of the time, like looking into platforms like Roblox and Fortnite and Minecraft and pretty much any online gaming platform where, most kids nowadays are probably playing it or have friends on it. There's a large number of things to be well aware of because the majority of content on these games might be entirely okay at first glance, but it's when you kind of start going down the rabbit hole and like, for example, if we're looking at Roblox, kids might come across just any normal games that they're playing with their friends, but all it takes is a click on a single game that pops up on their homepage or on their recommendations, and that game is something to do with like some sexual fetish or like bathrooms or like these very over-sexualized games that are being introduced to 9-year-olds playing on the platform, and those games are entirely accessible within just the homepage of that game, of that platform. And outside of that, there are also the entire issue of like sexual extortion, violent extremism, radicalization that is exceptionally prevalent across gaming platforms, where it's really easy for children, like particularly young teens, to kind of just fall into the wrong social circles where they might make some friends in these games because they're chatting with them. Maybe they're playing Fortnite, maybe they're playing Roblox. They're just chatting with them, meeting new friends, but those friends happen to be within those other circles, and it's a really easy path for children to be radicalized. Like, children are very susceptible to just a lot of different things online. It's really easy to be just encountering highly negative content, extremist content, and all sorts of just, horrific content online.
Yeah, well, I think we all originally thought that since it's marketed to children and young people that it will be safe, but now we are learning that potentially not so. So if you guys had a younger brother or sister, what advice would you give to them when it comes to navigating social media? This is a question for all of you, but shall we kick it off with you, Lucy?
Yeah, I have 2 younger brothers, and I think the way they interact on social media is quite different to me, probably just having different friend groups and being into sports, but I think just not going on it was the real first step. I got Instagram when I was 12, and my 14-year-old brother doesn't have it now. And that means that he goes to school, does his sport, comes back, and he's tired and rests instead of scrolling through a screen, kind of feeling numb and more exhausted and sleeping worse. And I think even though it's really hard with friendships where people just aren't talking about the same things, it's something that you just have to resist and build resilience through. I think I didn't realise that when I had social media and my friends didn't. And I also wish that I carried them along that journey a little bit more and was more open to talking perhaps about other things that weren't so tied to social media.
Thanks, Lucy. How about you, Mackenzie?
Yeah, I'm an only child, so I'll try my best. But I would say try and turn the fear of missing out into the joy of missing out, almost. There's so many things that we can actually look forward to in our day-to-day lives, and it's re-anchoring into what are the things that actually really excite you, whether it's an after-school sport activity or something along those lines. So yeah.
Love that. How about you, Arden?
Yeah, I'm also an only child, but I have millions of cousins, so that more than makes up for it. I would just say, and there's two things that I'd say to my younger cousins, and I have. The first one is don't let the rhetoric on social media, don't let the rhetoric in the world, and don't let stereotypes and negative influences shape who you are. Understand that you're bigger than that. That's the first thing, because even if people are off social media, eventually they're going to face these challenges, not as confrontational or not as much, but they're still going to face the challenges of people saying that they're not who they can be. And so telling them you're greater than what other people say you are. And then secondly, I'd just say approach everything with love and compassion, right? And approach everything with a spirit of willingness. So get out and do your sports, get out and do your extracurriculars, get out and do your learning, but do everything really, really well. And if you do that, you're not going to have enough time to go on social media anyway. Yeah. Cheers.
And how about you, Caden?
I do have quite a few siblings there, all of which do use social media quite a fair bit. But one of the main things I will always try to do with them, or try and tell them, is like, just come out and do things with me. Whether it be going to the beach, going for a walk, going on a hike, just getting outside, even if it's just going shopping at the mall, it's still so much better than just scrolling on your phone. And so just trying to drag everybody out to go do things, family activities with friends, and just really get engaged outside of that. Even like just in a general sense in uni life and whatnot, like you can go out with your friends and just do things other than just scrolling on your phones, and that same can be said for high schoolers too.
Thanks, guys. I mean, before we move on to our next panel, I just want to say that you guys are really paving the way for kids and teenagers that haven't been able to fathom another path. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and advice with us tonight. Can we have a big round of applause for our youth advisory group? Can I please welcome to the stage Kellie Lavender, Richie Hardcore, and Joe Robertson. All right, welcome to our expert panel. I am thrilled to introduce our next round of wonderful panellists tonight. First up, on my right in her lovely orange jacket, we have Joe Robertson. Joe is one half of online harm advocacy group Make Sense Aotearoa. The other half is Holly, who is here tonight. She's also a sex therapist with a Master of Science in Medicine, specialising in sexuality, relationships, and the cultural influences shaping sexual norms. Her dissertation focused on online sexual content and its impacts on adolescents, and she has over 15 years' experience in health, education, and counselling. She's also founder of Tricky Chat's parenting course, which two of you have won tonight, which is very exciting. So thank you for being here tonight, Joe. Round of applause. Thank you.
Gosh. This chair is very difficult to sit straight in.
Such a deep chair. I know, and I feel
really
like
rough.
Robert's watching me as well, so I don't know whether to go back or go forward. We also have Richie Hardcore. Richie is an educator and public speaker focusing on exploring masculinity, ending rape culture, sexual and family violence. He also speaks passionately about mental health and wellness, and as a former alcohol and drug harm reduction community worker, on how we can address AOD issues in our society, which I have since found out is alcohol and other drugs. I had to ask him about that. Richie has a master's degree in sociology, and his thesis looked at masculinity and hip hop. He's also the father of two boys. Welcome, Richie. And last but certainly not least, we have Kellie Lavender. Kellie has worked in the field of eating disorders for over 20 years with individuals of all ages presenting with almost the entire range of issues around disordered eating behaviour. She brings a wealth of experience and knowledge into her practice, as well as the humble understanding about how devastating these disorders can be for individuals and families. And over the past 10 years, Kellie has specialised further in working with adolescents and young adults suffering from anorexia nervosa. So welcome, Kellie. Thank you for being here. Okay, let's start with you, Joe. I'm sure a lot of parents will be sitting here wanting to know the answer to this question, the age-old pressing question. What on earth do we say when our child comes to us wanting a phone or a device or whatever it may be, and apparently they're the only kid on planet Earth that doesn't have it?
Yeah, cool. Just before we go there, hands up in the room, who's already past that point? So the kid already has a phone, they're already in device land, maybe like 30, 40%, yeah. So I guess this question doesn't really target you guys, and I want you to know that you're not left behind in this conversation. You know, if you've made that decision, we still really want to do everything we can for your young person, and there are strategies you can use that will be highly effective at keeping them safe. I know, it's a lot. It's like, I want to cross my legs and I can't.
He's committing to the cross
That's what I want to do. So sexism right here, because you're able to do that. It's more appropriate. It's less for me. I know, but it's cultural. So what you could do if your young person is coming to you who's asking for a phone, desperate, I mean, have they kept a drink bottle for a year? Like, I'm pretty practical when it comes to my kids when they ask this question. I'm like, I got 3 boys as well, and I'm like, okay, so when was the last time you lost a jumper? And they'll typically say last week, and I'm like, cool, so you want me to give you something that costs $1,000 when you can't keep your school jumper? Like, so I use really practical responses. They obviously don't super love that, but it also stops the conversation pretty quick. I'm a big fan of bribery. So if you need to throw them anything to delay, I'm honestly into it. I think we want to give them some wins. If they have a feeling of, I'm going to miss out for the next 2-3 years of my life, then maybe you want to pay for the cool thing that they want to do. We're currently in negotiations with our nearly 13-year-old. I've said I'll offer him a fair chunk of money to not get a smartphone till he's 17, and he's weighing that up. And
it is refreshing on a panel, just pure cash.
Just cash. Seriously, I've got another colleague of mine, she paid for her daughter to get eyelashes for 6 years to keep her off social media. It's good stuff. Like, use whatever you've got. But otherwise, aside from the bribery and the drink bottle strategy, you kind of just have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, which is saying no and feeling their feelings as a result. I think we've got a lot of passive parenting, to be honest, where we're afraid of our kids' discomfort, we're afraid of their pain, and we want to do whatever we can to rescue them from it. That's actually not our job, and that's not what's going to create great adults. Rescuing is not the strategy, resilience is. And they get that by experiencing some frustration, and this is an area where they're going to feel it, but for the best possible reason.
I love that. Totally agree. Yeah. Snaps. I totally agree with that. And then for the audience members who have older kids, what about those ones who feel like they gave a device to their older children too early because, I mean, God, we just didn't know. And what do they do about the younger ones who want things to be fair? Like, what if there's another child coming up in the ranks that is then upset that the goalposts have shifted?
Yeah, totally. So we initially, I can't remember, my oldest was probably like 8 and he started asking for a phone. You know, they ask when they're young just because they think that's going to make them grown up. And I said, when you turn 13. But that felt so far away when he was 8. And like now that he's nearly there, I'm like, that was the dumbest thing to do. Don't lock yourself into anything. Like it's a really it's a parenting strategy that we think is going to work for us and it really doesn't, is giving them some kind of milestone to work towards. So straight off the bat, you should not be locked into certain like phases or, you know, high school, 13, intermediate, that kind of stuff. My approach, and this is what I tell the boys, is I'm going to always move with the research. So I literally say that, and I'll share with them the research. So I'm going to use facts, not feelings, to determine my parenting of you. And so I told them recently about the latest data around executive functioning and screen time's impact of that. And, you know, that's not fun for them. It means that they don't watch as much screen time as they would like, but I'm going to lean on data. And I think I'm also then communicating something really strong to them, which is that we learn to make decisions. Like, we're going to prioritize research, evidence, and learning to know what's best for us, not just what feels good in the moment. So that's what I would say is, hey, we got a lot of research now that we didn't have when your older sibling was X age, and that's what we're going to let guide our choices.
That's great. That's really good. So we now have an understanding of how problematic devices can be for a myriad of different reasons, but let's focus on content for a minute. Kellie, you work with both adults and young people battling anorexia and bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder, and everything in between. Can you tell me if there's any research around the influence of social media on body image? Oh, there's a little thing you got to flick up.
This feels like a leading question.
There is. I'll just grab my glasses here. Unfortunately, as Dr. Marsh kind of started at the beginning, the vulnerable time is adolescence for lots of different reasons: social changes, cognitive changes, including body changes, in terms of that kind of turn of adolescent social comparison. We've all been through it. Unfortunately, New Zealand is very lacking in data itself, but we know from Australia the increase in eating disorders and disordered eating between 2012 and 2024 is outrageously huge. So I'll just tell you what that is. So 76% increase was observed in 15 to 19-year-olds. A 200% increase in 10 to 14-year-olds. And for the first time, 5 to 9-year-olds were represented in the data. So we know that eating disorders are complex, and it's not social media causing an eating disorder, but it certainly sends messages about how you should look, what's right, inspiration, dieting, all of these beauty kind of messages. It's quite sinister. And we also know the algorithms are quite sinister as well. So for people who are vulnerable and already into that, do I need to lose weight to feel better for myself? The algorithm is something like 3,000% higher for people with those vulnerabilities to healthy controls. So it's actually a huge problem.
It is indeed a big problem. What about the warning signs of an eating disorder in your child? What should parents be looking out for as red flags?
So I think what's really important for parents to know generally is that what can start to look like a teenager looking like, oh my goodness, my teen's starting to show an interest in healthy food. My teen's starting to exercise a bit more. This is great. After seeing kind of maybe that kind of can't get them out of the bedroom or the other kind of programs that we have with teens. But actually it can be something that can turn into something sinister quite quickly. I couldn't list them all off, so that's why I've done a slide here. So, and in particular, the new trend, of course, is around young men and the obsessiveness around going to the gym and muscularity, in terms of kind of use of protein, steroids, peptides, creatinine, like all of these things that get sometimes framed up as health, can become quite sinister quite quickly. So, yes, these are warning signs, including things around their thoughts, around complaining about, I'm not happy with myself, I'm fat, I'm ugly, lots of body checking, I want to lose some weight. It's actually highly abnormal for a developing child or adolescent to lose weight. So this is a normal growth and development, so any weight loss during this period of time should be deemed a warning sign. There's also some really important act now things. So could you two go to the next slide?
I'll just stay here.
I'll just remain seated.
Oh, look at that. Here it is. No, yeah.
That good?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. So these are more act now. So please don't see it as a phase. This is not a phase. These are warning signs. So yeah, fasting, skipping meals, obvious weight loss, refusing to eat with you as a family, 2 skip menses with weight loss for girls, any binge episode, any purge episode that is not normal, excessive exercise as well, refusing to allow others to prepare food for them. If I had my daughter when she was a teenager, I mean, I could not get her in the kitchen to literally do anything. So if your teen is saying, I want to make all my own food, thank you very much, there's a problem. So those are the act now.
Next slide.
That'll be fine. I think that's probably enough.
Next one.
Yep. No, that's done.
Okay. And so then when or if a parent has recognised these signs in their child, then how do they talk to them about that? What do they do?
Oh, that's good. Well, let's just stay with this slide.
I got you.
So, yeah, don't feel like you're walking on eggshells. You cannot make it worse by having an honest conversation with your child. And so be direct, but obviously non-confrontational, non-judgmental. There could be feelings of shame or anxiety, and so please come with it with a firm but loving, compassionate questioning. They could be also in denial, so expect, to be fobbed off and pushed away, but that doesn't mean that you stop. So it means persistence if you continue to see these things. Please roll with resistance. You don't have to fight about it. You can continually kind of point out your concerns and say, look, hey, I'm worried. So don't give up on that. And so encourage and support, but don't collude. Don't say it's okay to go to the gym 7 times a week when you're worried about them losing weight at the same time. And try not to negotiate or get into negotiations about things, unlike maybe some other kind of strategies. And really early intervention is incredibly important. So go to the GP, reach out to kind of some agencies such as EDANS or Eating Disorder Carer Support, and just bounce your concerns off someone else. That would be my advice.
Thanks, Kellie. That's very helpful. And Richie, I'm going to need you to sit back down because I have a question for you. So I want to bring you in here because you work with so many boys and young men, and Kellie just touched on some of the issues that we're dealing with at the moment. But why are boys in general going online? What is it that they're looking for in particular?
Yeah, firstly, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And just quickly, I talk about like gender and masculinity a lot, and a quick scan of the room, it's probably about 80% mums, 20% dads here. Isn't that
I
interesting?
reckon it's a 90-10.
90-10?
Yeah, could be a 99-1.
I'm trying to be generous. But it is really fascinating to me to see that, right? Like parenting should be like genderless. You know, you should both do it. So shout out, I do want to acknowledge all the dads who broke out of your gender norm to come here.
But also, I just have to acknowledge if the mums are here, then who's home with the kids?
Well,
you know?
Yeah, I hear you. But point is, why do boys go online looking for this information? Well, we've had a decline in community, right? Like the most mature 18-year-old in the world was talking about...
I vote for him as Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Arden, it's you.
He was talking quite correctly about the fact that what's supported him is his sporting community, his mentoring community. These things have declined for a range of reasons for the last 40 years. So economically and politically, we've got particular things that have meant that we all work longer hours, we require 2-parent incomes to survive, most of us. Not, you know, like these things mean that the advice that historically fathers, uncles, friends, you know, would give to boys just isn't on hand. We have a high amount of fatherless homes as well. And boys are looking for the answers that no one is giving them. You know, I spoke at a school a couple of days ago and a young man came up to me. He said his father died when he was 8 and he didn't have any men in his life. He was raised in a single mother household. He didn't have uncles or a grandfather on hand. So he found himself looking at Andrew Tate content, you know. And Andrew Tate is obviously passé, but he is sort of like the godfather of what we call the manosphere, an interconnected network of blogs, influencers, podcasts that promote a very anti-female, anti-feminist, hyper-masculinist idea of what it means to be a man, which is very limited, and that we know actually hurts boys and men. So boys are going looking for answers. They're looking for really normal things, like how do I kiss a girl, or how do I ask a girl out, or how do I get fit, or how do I study better for my exams, or how do I make a bit of money? And then the algorithm often drives the most extreme content towards them, right? Like if you speak in a very relaxed, calm, nuanced, objective way, you're not going to get pushed into young people's algorithms. Whereas if you put the most hyperbolic, pro-violent, anti-woman content out there, you are. So there's a real design flaw there. But we know that the people who own these companies, it's not a flaw for them, right? They don't care that you're depressed and scrolling, they just care that you're scrolling. And so unfortunately, as one of our other youth panelists said, young men are getting driven towards quite radical ideas. At the worst end of it is violent extremism, which leads to terrorism. And at the worst end of it is, at perhaps a more day-to-day level, are quite unhelpful narratives which, internalized over time, do lead towards the sorts of ideas around manhood that contribute to our exponentially high rates of male suicide, that lead to our exponentially high rates of male and female violence. We have the highest rate of domestic violence in the Western world, in the OECD, high rates of sexual violence, and also loneliness and depression and substance abuse. So we need to help give our boys offline examples and offline answers for really normal teenage questions. And unfortunately, we're not doing that. So it doesn't mean it's insurmountable. We can entirely do it. We just need political and community will.
It's so true. And that's such a good point about algorithms, because these extreme views represent such a small percentage of the population. But because they are pushed out so incessantly by these platforms, then now they are becoming more normalized, which I do want to talk about the manosphere, but it's hard to know whether it's being augmented by parents who aren't actually consumers of this stuff. Like I saw a 60 Minutes episode on it. You know, I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But, you know, I don't know whether that's being blown out of proportion and if young people aren't actually consuming that as much. So my first question is, are they? And my second question is, how do we as parents try and keep our kids safe from it?
Okay, quick plug. If you have money and would like to fund research, I've spoken to 2 different researchers, one in America, one in Christchurch, who would love to work with me conducting actual qualitative and quantitative data about what young men are looking at online, because we don't have good New Zealand-specific data. So if you want to fund us, holler at your boy. Yeah, so I draw a lot of my public speaking work from international data or Australian data, and Movember tells us that, who do have money, and that manospheric content has gone mainstream. So the perhaps more extreme voices like Andrew Tate, or everyone's talking about clavicular right now, I don't think a lot of boys, my sense of it, actually go out looking for this stuff, but the ideas that those guys put out into the online ecosystem does filter through to your regular sort of gym-advised personal trainer, right? So it might not be explicitly ideological or anti-feminist, but the outcome is sort of the same. So you see it in youth parlance. Do you guys say, like, I talk like I'm 17 a lot of the time. You've got my grown-up inside voice, but do you see triple Xing? Like, I'm mental health maxing, or I'm relaxing. Do you guys do this? Yeah,
Looks
what's up,
maxing.
homegirl? My girl down the front knows what's up. Like, any of the adults in the room know what I'm talking about? Right? But so we see the filter of the language, like the semantic lexicon shift, right? So that I think is indicative that at least some of these ideas are cross-pollinating, you know what I'm saying? So if like we use the language and the jargon even for humor, I think it's a good example that actually the ideas sort of do filter through. Does that make sense? I asked a few hundred boys the other day, like, do any of you take clavicular seriously? And they don't. Like, I think very, very few boys are smashing their face with a hammer, and I think the New York Times and Vanity Fair and 60 Minutes talking about these things do it because it is, if it bleeds, it leads, right? Like, it's outrageous, and we're like fascinated by this crazy subculture, but it's a little bit unhelpful because it then takes those concepts into the mainstream, right? So there's a bit of a moral panic around it, but it comes back to the same thing, right? Like, you were talking about like youth insecurity leading to like eating disorder content. I know boys who use steroids in order to look a particular way because they have been acculturated largely through social media influence to think that being masculine is fitting a particular, body image, the way that girls have always had that pressure, right? So they're using, steroids and other performance-enhancing substances to fit that. And, the story of clavicular, I think, is overblown, but is the extreme example of how that can look, right? That said, like, boys do consume a lot of really damaging content, irrespective if it's not manospheric. Like, a lot of, like, street violence. Like, I work across, like, a socioeconomic spectrum of boys, right? And particularly our boys who are economically and socially disadvantaged and maybe gang-associated or gang-affiliated. You can get a lot of clout and off like smashing someone up and putting it on your TikTok, right? And I'm sure you've all seen like viral street fights, yeah? Like,
Their algorithm's real different to yours.
Mine is crafts.
Yeah. There's a lot of renovation. There's a lot of gardening.
You've never seen a 3-on-1 street fight? What?
Just in our feeds.
Okay, speaking more professionally then, a couple of years ago, someone sent me a video of a boy getting pretty badly beaten up on the way home from school, right? And I shared it looking for the identifying features of the offenders to pass on to the police. And it became a viral video, made it to the New Zealand Herald. So many parents and other young people sent me very similar content, right? Because the clout chasing is a driver of the violence. Does that make sense? You can build an online audience and get all the validation that comes with that for physically harming someone. And that's not specifically boys, because girls do this too, but our boys do that, right? Social media is a gang marketing and a gang platform tool as well. I think these are things that often don't make it to you guys who crochet or whatever, right? So
We live in a happier world.
you live in a world. But
Yeah.
no, but like this is perhaps divorced from your reality, but we do need to think across our society, right? There are different sorts of harms. Like when we think about and they are different across socioeconomic thresholds, right? So I do work with kids who have been shot or stabbed, and they're like 14, 15, or 16, right? And again, there's a normalizing factor that online platforms provide our most at-risk youth around like carrying weapons and things like this. And how do we give kids alternatives to that? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it definitely does. But I have another question, and this is something that I grapple with, because, we have boundaries around devices in our own home, but my son is going to get to an age where he's going to get on the school bus, or he's going to go to friends' houses that I have no idea what their boundaries are around devices. So, Joe, I've heard you talk about this before, and I know you have really good advice. How do we deal with the lack of control when our kids are somewhere else and they could be exposed to something horrible?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's our reality, right? It's developmentally appropriate for them to not be under our control. It would be a problem if going through their adolescence, we maintain the same level of control over them that we had when they were 8. I want to just pick up something that Richie mentioned. So he talked about, the kind of political, kind of the capitalist society, meaning that 2 parents have to work, etc. We actually have modern dads spending significantly more time with their young people than ever before in history. So it's not the lack of presence, it's the lack of conversation. So you also touched on this, Kellie, which I thought was awesome, not being afraid of the conversation, bringing it up and not being ashamed of that, or like walking on eggshells. And the exact same thing needs to occur with every other type of harm we know they'll experience online. So just our presence isn't actually enough. We need to have explicit conversations with them about porn, about grooming, about violence and clout, like chasing clout for that, about the FOMO, the loneliness, the depression, the anxiety. Like, we have to actually say the things, and that's part of when we release control of them and they start to go to people's houses that we maybe don't like, right? Like they do. They go to these parties or they go and hang out with people, and that's not maybe our pick for them, but they're 14 and it's not appropriate for us to be choosing every single place they go anymore. So we have to have conversations. I am a believer in reaching out as much as possible to those families, not just because it will protect my own kid more if I have a conversation with them about devices and harm, but also because we don't know what we don't know. And maybe it'll be the first time that parent has had somebody else say to them, hey, is it okay if, they don't game or they're not on phones or whatever it is? It might be the first time they've thought about that. And so I use it kind of as a little strategy of, I guess, community learning there too. But we currently have quite strict rules around going to friends' houses in terms of they can't just turn up to anyone's house without talking to us first, even though they spend a lot of time roaming the neighbourhood. So of course they could be lying to us, like 100%. I was lying a lot when I was growing up. There was a lot of lying. But I'm just thinking about the drinking and all the things. So I was not having street fights, though. Other people were. But we have really strict rules, so they go to friends' houses, they're not on devices there. So I will call those families, or I will talk ahead of time and say, hey, playdates are non-device time for us. And if that family is like, oh, nah, we're not doing that, then they're not going there. Like, that's... maybe that's uncomfortable for those families, but I'm not actually here for them. Like, they're not my priority. Making other adults comfortable is not my priority, as you can pick up. But yeah. But keeping my own kids safe and well is. So they are my primary responsibility, and therefore I'll have any amount of uncomfortable conversations to keep them safe. But we are also having really explicit conversations about the content they'll see. So we talk about porn when they turn 10. That's our thing, because the average age that they see it is 12, and that's 50% of our kids seeing porn before they're 12. So we're gonna talk about it when they're 10. As soon as they're on, they don't game, there's no gaming in our house, but we talk about grooming and how that can occur in other people's homes and how to identify it with maybe if it's happening to a friend. We talk about sexual harm, sexual violence, we talk about the manosphere. We're having all of these conversations at probably much earlier ages than other people are, because I just know they're gonna see it. Like, it's not if, it's when, and it's going to be earlier than all of us imagine. So I'd much rather hear about it from me first, and I can give them some critical thinking.
I think, can I add to that? As a father,
No, I was really good all by itself.
I think it's also just about like finding teachable moments and little and often. So like with my eldest son, even my youngest son, when I'm talking to parents, it's like, you don't need to sit down and stare in your son's eye and be like, want to talk about porno? Because they don't. But when you're watching, I don't know, like a TV show together or listening to music together, because I think it's important to listen to whatever your kids are listening to, even though it's a real punish. You actually get to see what their world is, you know what I'm saying, and what they're exposed to. Oh, what does that mean? Or why do you like this? Or blah, 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 you know what I mean? So it's like just paying attention to the world that your kids are navigating and then exploring those ideas through Socratic questioning rather than a big lecture. Because kids don't necessarily want you to tell them off. They want to know that you're a safe space to take things to them. And if they're fearful that they're going to lose some sort of privilege or you're going to punish them for very normal questions, then that's slowly going to erode that trust and that ability to be a counterforce to the shitty world that we built for them to navigate.
I really like, just to say one thing, I really like the idea of bringing up these conversations. Don't assume your kid hasn't been exposed to this, because I can guarantee you, if they're on social media, they have. And so being able to bring up these conversations and make them just part of I saw this on the radio the other day, and what about this? And is this something that you've been exposed to? Or like, I live a little bit out of the city where I work, and it was basically a 40-minute drive with my daughter, and this was the best time when we were in the car where we would kind of talk about these things and bring them up, and it wasn't in a judgmental way at all, or it just opened up those conversations. And every time I would say to her, has that ever been a thing? Like, have you guys talked about that, seen that? Oh yeah, Mum, you're out of the loop, you had that 2 years ago. So yeah, just keep those conversations open.
Yeah, so true. Lucy from the Youth Advisory Group had a really good point earlier, actually, because I said, I think there's actually some younger kids coming along tonight. And so I was having a quick look through just and thinking, I think it's all appropriate. And then she said, well, better that they're going to hear it here in a safe space than some random person in the playground, which will 100% happen. And I thought that is a very good point. So thank you very much to our incredible panelists tonight, Kellie Lavender, Richie Hardcore, and Joe Robertson. And I also want to thank you all for coming along tonight. I know it's rainy and cold and wintry, and I want to say thank you, because some of the biggest impact we can have is in our own homes. So I hope that you're all feeling empowered and you learnt something from one of the incredible speakers we've had tonight. And just to finish off, we're now going to share with you a first look of a brand new docuseries from Overactive Imagination. It's called Under the Influence, and it debuts next week on the New Zealand Herald. So this is hot off the press, people. And as part of the series, they took actual dialogue from the social media algorithm of a 13-year-old girl's Instagram and TikTok and put it in a real-world context. And it really exposes the harm being driven to our young people by algorithms. I mean, would you want your kids to hang out in this park?
If you're 12 and you really want to lose weight, focus on eating more fruits and vegetables.
It's not the carbs, it's the overeating.
Daily habits that make you ugly. Crossing legs, hunchback, chin resting.
You can always be thinner. But attractive people know that you don't.
Things you think are normal but are actually signs of high-functioning anxiety.
Don't forget number 6.
When I grow up, I'ma be a supermodel.
Want a perfect nose?
I'm 15. I like anime and animals. I can do dirty talk sometimes. I will care for you so much.
I'm 15. I like anime and animals. I can do dirty talk sometimes. I will care for you so much.
New developments in the alleged murder of a Gold Coast schoolgirl.
With police reviewing a haunting video posted by the mother.
Well, I tried to kill myself when I was 14. I didn't want to live.
It's 2 names. Look them up on social media. They were normal teenagers and now they're gone.
I didn't want to live.
One perfect
I will care for you.
Yeah, she's just at the park. Yep, couple more emails, then I'm done.
Well, I tried to kill myself when I was 14. I didn't want to live.
Social media, it's just this chaos of desire.
Constantly comparing yourself, and it's so hard not to when it's just there and you see it all the time.
You definitely get hooked onto the other things that come with it, you know, the influences, the culture, the hardness of it.
And it's a little bit of trauma Olympics. You'll be pushed into algorithms that will make you compete to prove that your pain is valid.
If something is wrong, if your kid is in a vulnerable state, that spiral starts.
It took her insecurities and said, we're going to manipulate and amplify every insecurity that you have around yourself.
How can this be so effective in promoting something to me, but then things that we show not interested in, it's suddenly very useless and it doesn't make any difference?
We can do it. We can turn this ship around.
And I took the phone and I lobbed it across the room.
It's changed the conversations that are happening in our school.
Keep talking about it until you find someone who will listen.
So that's launching next week. And then we have one more video from the legends at Kids Unplugged of Jack. We'll leave you with that.
On my phone, I rarely ever get below 80% battery. If anything, I'm on my phone to record things, take photos, and call people.
I love that he's gone from being a screen addict to being a purposeful activist.
Purpose to me is what's your goal in life. It's what is behind everything. I hear all these things, but what am I really doing it for? I'm doing it to change people. I'd say change the world, but that will be in a few years from now. I just want to make a difference. Yeah. There's a lot of people here, holy. Things like Greta Thunberg going to the United Nations meeting and giving that speech, I want to do stuff like that.
I stand here today as a rangatahi Māori who believes in the power of our voices and the strength of our communities. Because I want Aotearoa to listen. I want our leaders to hear the call for Māori wards and to understand why they matter to us, the next generation. Change takes time, but it starts with action. I'm taking action. You can take action too. And to my fellow rangatahi, don't wait for someone else to make change. Stand up, speak out, and ride your own journey, whatever that looks like.